Thanks so much, Kareel, and welcome to our panelists who are our leaders of the financial services sector. We know there are so few female leaders right at the top of the financial services sector, so we're really delighted to have this representation today. We often actually have a leader panel at our summit, and we have this so that we can unpack and hear the true story about how they came to the top. So with no further ado, welcome everybody. And I'd like to ask our panel, if they were to say, look back on their careers, what are the two most important levers that really helped them to get to the top? What would they say? So I'm going to start off with Anne and then move to Amanda and over to Mkwandi. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ines, and it's lovely to be here again with you. I mean, it's been such an exciting few days here at Financial Alliance for Women. I'm so pleased that hundreds and hundreds of people have tuned in every day. If I think about my own career, I would say it was two things that really helped me move. One was that I never waited to apply for a job that was advertised. I always looked at what I wanted to do next. Usually contacted the person who ran that department and actually asked them for a role. And I think taking a very proactive stance on your career very early on is a great way to manage it. It's a great way to manage it throughout your whole career life. And even in my final role as Vice Chair of MasterCard, I took that attitude as well. The second thing is that I always had people inside and outside my company who I considered my sponsors. And I talk about sponsorship instead of mentorship because these are usually quite senior people who can make a difference, influence people, talk to people on your behalf and really sponsor you. And I do that for a lot of people inside and outside my company too, because I think it's a real career lever for the future.
Excellent. And Anne, can I ask you a probing question on that? How come you had the wisdom to do those two things?
I'm not sure that it's particularly wisdom, but I think seeing, reaching for something that you want and not necessarily waiting for it to happen. It was probably just an attitude of mine that I was excited to be in the working world, and I saw a lot of things out there that I wanted to do, such as I became the first woman ever to go on the oil and gas rigs in Britain because I wanted to be at the cutting edge of the gas industry. Very interesting thing to say today after gas prices have moved about 60% in the last 2 days. But I think it's really having an enthusiasm for life and going for what you want. It's not wisdom, it's just desire, I suppose.
Right, awesome. The desire to get to learn and to get up there. So Amanda, over to you. What were the two things that you would say were critical to getting you ahead?
So this is really interesting, and I absolutely promise you that Anne and I have not compared notes on this at all. But I would absolutely agree with Anne about needing to start early on. And if I look at my own career, I was really lucky that very early on, I identified that I was really loved insurance and I really wanted to work in insurance and I really wanted to do really well. So I would put myself up for every opportunity. And I think, not waiting or always thinking it'll be next year when you'll start that or next month or whatever, but really sort of working on that right from the very beginning. So I think that early stages, thinking about your career and thinking about what you want is really, really key. And in fact, if I look at the data that we have here at Aviva, I would say that what we see is that those careers that get a really good start early on actually do a lot better than those that don't. So, and it's right at the most junior levels of the organization. So it's never too soon. So I would agree with Anne on that. And I would also agree with Anne on the second point around sponsorship. For me, having sponsors right the way through my career, not mentors, as Anne said, but people who actively will speak on your behalf, that are promoting you, that are talking about you, that are giving you that little push, that nudge to say, go on, you can do this. That has made a really big difference. And I can probably identify probably only a handful actually of people in my career that have done that for me, but they've made the most enormous difference. So, you know, that sponsorship and having the relationship with that sponsor, it has been really important. So I'm so sorry, because, you know, I know there are hundreds of women listening to this and thinking they're going to come up with like 10 different ideas, but perhaps, you know, the two most simple ideas, and they're not difficult things for people to do either.
Well, I thank you, Amanda, and I hear the passion it's akin to the desire piece that Anne was talking about. And I think reflecting on that, it's a bit like when you look back on your pension and, you know, you cashed out your pension in your mid-20s, like I did, to travel the world with a backpack. And you realize the value of keeping the money in there, because it accumulates over time. So that's very useful. And it is something I will tell my 14-year-old daughter when I get off the phone here. Okay, over to you, Mukwandi, because of course we want to hear what it was like for you in your environment, and what would be the two things you would say?
Thanks, Inez. I think in our environment, there's a lot less of sponsorship per se, because we're just starting out really on this journey. Just to give a bit of perspective of who we are as Zanaco, we're a 52-year-old company that has been in the financial services industry and is the largest commercial bank in Zambia. And I was recently appointed, just about a year ago, appointed into this role. And just this morning, I was meeting a client and he said to me, "It still shocks us that you're actually the CEO of Zanaco." And this was a client, he didn't mean anything negative by it, but he was just sharing his view of where we are socially. So even through my career path, we didn't necessarily have that level of sponsorship to say somebody will hold my hand through it. Yes, we were given the opportunities, but there was no substitute for the first point that I'm raising: hard work. We had to work twice as hard than anybody else just to get there, to get a seat at the table, twice as hard as anyone. And just to make sure that we actually even had the opportunity to rise to the next level, we had to work even harder. And so I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. And within that hard work, there has to be a very clear plan for where you want to go. So within that plan, then, with the hard work and applying yourself, you're more likely to get there because you increase your chances. And that has been my journey. I worked very, very hard to get here. And I believe everyone works very hard to get wherever it is that they're going. But I think in our society in particular, it's almost as though you have to prove yourself and prove yourself again, even when you have already proved yourself. The second point that I would like to raise as regards how I got here in my journey is a grounding of faith and courage. Because without having that something to hold on to, sometimes things are really, really difficult. And you just need to be able to remind yourself that actually there's a bigger purpose in life. There's a greater being in life who can guide you through whatever it is that you're going through and get you to the other side. So those are the two that I would share at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mukwandi. So interesting. And I suppose this notion of hard work is not really a surprise, because I know both Amanda and Anne, I'm sure I know Anne is, because I know her quite well, an extremely hard worker. So yeah, that's very interesting. And also kind of interesting today, Mukwandi, that one of your customers was surprised that you're a woman at the helm. Is that something that's changing? I have some experience in Zambia. I know Dr. Takia Mabula quite well, who is the deputy governor of the Bank of Zambia, and she told me her story about being educated by the Irish nuns actually down there, and you know, and how you know, a lot of women have made it to the top in financial services in Zambia. If you compare it to other some of the other African countries, could you comment a little bit on the state of women in the financial services sector in Zambia, and what do you think the country has done a little bit differently to make that happen?
I think when I look back on where we started from to where we are today, I think a lot has changed. So we stand on the shoulders of people who actually made a difference, so to speak. And without taking away from where any other communities are, I think we were starting from a position where we had to, first of all, get the seat at the table, and then having had the seat at the table, grow from there. So it is a bit of a common occurrence to have a customer talk to me the way that customer spoke to me today, but it's not as common as it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I was just starting out on my the career ladder, so to speak. So previously you would find that somebody wouldn't even think that you could be in a particular position, but now there is that acceptance. But it doesn't mean that as Zambians, we're a society that doesn't provide for that equitable positioning. It's just a society issue that goes all the way back to our traditional background and why we are where we are today in terms of the mindset. And the only way to really change it is by proving ourselves. And that's why I keep emphasizing that there's no shortcut to this. It's not that others don't work hard, but we have to just prove ourselves and prove ourselves again each time and plan for it. And it's still going on today, even when we have achieved what we have achieved. But it's something that we believe is actually going to change. I don't think my daughter will go through the same procedures as I did because our society is now different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting. So we'll get to our daughters in a minute with the Gen Z, but let's talk a little bit about, we've done quite a bit of work at the Alliance on gender diversity and inclusion and getting women into leadership positions. And what's quite clear is that a little bit the low-hanging fruit has been picked. So we now have, thankfully, a number of female CEOs of large financial institutions. But there seems to be a worry about the kind of, let's say, the middle ranks and not having enough in the pipeline. And I'm wondering if you could comment on what is going on with this missing middle and how we can get more women into those positions that are positioned them to go forward into the C-suite. Anne, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, Ines, this is something that came up in research in the last couple of years, but I think it's something that we've been aware of for quite a long time. And a year and a half ago, I actually kind of looked inside our company and said, well, that can't be true in our company. There must be women coming up through from the middle ranks and so on. But what we found was that at a certain level of the pipeline, there was a bit of a squeeze, and it was kind of women taking their first step on the management ladder. We saw that there were higher attrition rates of women than men there, and we also saw that men were accelerating in terms of promotions. So we put in a program across the company that basically looked at this and pulled together something like 1,100 women across the company to say, what are you experiencing at this level? Let's have some mentorship and let's talk about things that will really help your career move. It's early days. We've just got the first year results. The thing that I can tell you is that the women who joined this mentorship program have actually got higher rankings in terms of their performance than they had before. So I'm quite hopeful that this might translate into staying and actually being promoted. But I think that this is happening in all companies, and it can be a result of dual career couples moving around the world. It can be a result of having families. It can be a result of many different things. It's not just one thing, though. And I think really understanding what women are facing at this level and actually helping them make that big step is really important in the business world.
Thanks so much, Anne. Over to you, Amanda, because I know this was something that you're quite concerned with in Aviva.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm concerned about it in Aviva, and I'm also concerned about it in my role as the sort of women in finance champion for the UK government, because I don't think it's just an Aviva problem. As Anne just said, I think this is a problem in every organisation. And unfortunately, it's not a problem that is going to be solved quickly, because you need to bring women through so that they actually they do the beginning, the middle, and the senior end of their careers. So I think that when we've looked at it here and when we've looked at it across the UK industry, what is happening is women are, as Anne said, deciding to opt out at an earlier stage. So either because they want to have family, and then when they come back, they don't come back at the same level as they went out of the organization. Or they say, actually, you know, this is, they're smart and they say, actually, I can do something else more entrepreneurial somewhere else. And I don't need to work in a big organization and become the CEO, because that actually doesn't look that much fun. You know, you have to work really hard and you have to work really long hours. And actually, it doesn't look like you can be that successful. Where are the role models? So I think it's about getting the data. And what we need to do is we really need to be looking at the data through our organizations right from the very beginning of everybody's career, men and women, for all sectors, to say what is actually happening so that we know when to put the interventions in place. Because I think our experience is that, you know, putting an intervention in place when a woman reaches a middle management layer is too late. You have to do it much sooner than that in order to keep them within your organization so that they have the opportunity to get to the middle management and then to get to the senior layer. And the next thing I would say is that we have to stop pushing women into the more functional roles, you know, and basically achieving the targets in those functional roles, whether that's, you know, finance or people or marketing. We need to make sure that women are coming through to become chief execs. And, you know, and there aren't enough of those. So, you know, all the fact that, you know, we've done very well and we pat ourselves on the back in the UK about achieving, you know, the Hampton-Alexander targets, that is brilliant on boards. There are plenty of women INEDs, and, you know, but there are not enough women executive directors. And that is what I think we need to work on. So it's two, you know, it's a number of things which I think cause me a great concern, but I really don't believe that we have the answer. And I think we need more data. We need to understand where the interventions are put in place. And then I think we need to be patient, because it is going to take time to actually develop, for these women to develop into the more senior roles.
Thanks, Amanda. Very, very insightful. So over to Zambia now. So Mukwandi, what are you seeing in terms of this pipeline for the C-suite, and how are you supporting women to be there and to be cultivated for the top jobs?
I actually agree with Amanda on this one. What we're seeing in Zambia is similar to what's being seen in the UK, in terms of there is a very clear missing middle. And I expect that it's because of the people who are at childbearing age and taking choices at that point in time. And I agree that we need to make sure that those interventions are applied much earlier on. And one such intervention that we have applied in Zanaco is putting in place a coaching and mentoring program, just so that we catch them early and we give them options, so that it's not necessarily the only choice to step away and opt out, so to speak. And so our view is that we should be able, with these interventions, to improve the chances. When you look at our lower level staff in terms of overall Zanaco, maybe at the teller or frontline perspective, we have about 50% women. Then in the middle, we'll have about 30%. And then at the top, again, we seem to have achieved quite some balance in terms of the C-suite, about 40% women. But that missing middle does exist. And so with those deliberate interventions of coaching and mentoring, and even some of the recruitment ideas, how do we create a safe place for a woman to grow in her career and feel that she's able to then flourish and still have that balanced life? Those are some of the areas that we need to shift in terms of the paradigm of what it takes to be able to deliver this. And with doing so, we're able to then bring in that culture of you can make choices and still come back into the program of getting the work done and growing in your career. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're going to have a baby, then you have to step away from your career. So those are the conversations that we have with the missing middle, and prior to them becoming the missing middle. And I think they're actually having an impact. It also does help to see that it's possible to actually get to the top of the organization. And so there's something to look forward to. If I'm able to do this and that, then I'll have that opportunity, rather than viewing it as this is the end and there is a glass ceiling. So those are the various initiatives that we've tried to put in place to just encourage everyone to just go through whatever it is that they need to go through to deliver to expectations in terms of performance and grow in their career and want to do it. The most important thing is to actually want to do it, because it's almost as though at some point when you're making that choice, it's almost as though it's not worth it because I'd rather just go with this. So how do you make sure that that choice is really an option? And through these mechanisms, we're able to deliver that.
Okay, that's so interesting, because we had a panel on Tuesday about Gen Z, and Gen Z aren't looking for a long-term career in a corporation. They, as you know, from the research that's out there, they're looking to move around jobs. They're looking at the shared economy. They're not even looking at buying houses. There's a kind of a completely different mindset, if you like. Now, I don't know whether this is market research people kind of, making things trendy or whatever, but I'm just curious, are you seeing any difference in recruiting and the behavior of Gen Z and how we think about life and career, and indeed staying in a you all worked hard, you worked your way up through the ranks, you moved around companies that enabled you to get up there in terms of your skills and your positioning. I mean, how is that going to play out for Gen Z, do you think? Gen Z women?
Well, a good friend of mine at London Business School, Linda Grattan, wrote that book, 100-Year Life. And I think that's what the Gen Z are facing, and they won't have a career like us. I'm in my 60s now, so my life was kind of separated into, I went to school, I went to work, and at some point, when I'm about 90, I might retire. But Gen Z, when you look out into the future and see that we've got a future with 5G and artificial intelligence, they're going to be doing jobs that you can't even imagine today. So the important thing for them is to move around, is to continuously learn, is to have a career that's extremely flexible. So they're probably doing all the right things, I think, in this. And if we think about women, as I mentioned earlier, I think we've got to care that there aren't enough women actually going into areas like artificial intelligence, because the people in those areas are building the algorithms that make decisions for us in the future, shape our world. And if we don't have women involved and women in mind when we're designing the future, that's a very bad problem to have. That's one of the reasons why we do things inside our company, such as Girls for Tech. We're actually talking to girls as young as 8 years old, between the ages of sort of 8 and 14, and saying, don't drop your STEM subjects. You don't have to be a geek, but stay involved, stay active, continue to learn, because, the technology world is a wonderful place to work for women. And there's so many different things that you can do. And I personally love the idea that people do what I did, which is actually change careers from being an engineer to being a banker to being a restructurer, now being in MasterCard, which is in the consumer tech world. It just makes life interesting. So I think that's what Gen Z need, and that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, what's your perspective on Gen Z?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had a brilliant opportunity to meet with our 121 new interns, graduates, and apprenticeships. And it was their first week at Aviva, so it was absolutely fantastic. And I was looking at this massively diverse group of individuals, and I looked at them, and they were so enthusiastic and so eager to learn. And I spent an hour or so with them. And what struck me was, first of all, the diversity, which is just fantastic. So you sort of have to say that's absolutely brilliant. And then, just as Anne said, you were asking about what degrees that they had done, and loads of them had come from they'd done data science or maths or physics or engineering, and so they're coming from really broad subject areas which are really relevant to the future of work. But when you go into the questions, the sort of things they were asking me were about, what is the purpose of the organization? What is Aviva's stance on sustainability? And obviously we've made some bold claims on sustainability. And when I was exploring with them why they'd chosen to come to Aviva, that is what they were making their decisions based on the type of organization that we were purpose-led, that we had strong and bold ambitions around sustainability, that we had a good diversity of roles for them to do. So, you know, Anne's right, they should do everything, but they don't necessarily have to do everything in lots of different organizations. You know, there are opportunities to do lots of jobs within, you know, within our organization. But I also saw what I saw in myself at that age: ambition, enthusiasm, you know, really wanting to get on and do a good job. So I don't think we should just be broad brush about the way that we sort of, you know, we box generations. And in fact, at Avivo, you know, we've got a sort of generation groups for all the generations, because we don't want to focus just on one generation. We're looking also at the older generation and making sure we keep them in work, because thinking about our customer base, I think it's really important that we represent the 16 million customers that we have in the people that we have working in the organization. So, you know, I don't get too hung up on Gen Z, because I think at some point when you get older and you get more responsible and, you know, you have to think about different things, you do change and your perspective changes. But we have a lot to learn from that generation. And I think for me, you know, their reason for coming to work is partly the same as mine, but there's a lot of it that's different. They're definitely very purpose driven. And, you know, that if your organization is purpose driven, then you're going to benefit greatly from Gen Z, I think.
So interesting. Okay, what's it like in Zambia in terms of people looking for purpose out of the companies that they work for? And how does Gen Z, is it a concept even in Zambia yet? You know, this idea that they'll, you know, we all know about the coders and all of that kind of group of cool kids, but like, how do you think about the Gen Z? Is it something you think about as a leader in Zanaco?
So we have to think about it, and that's because in terms of population, that's 50% of our population in Zambia. We have such a significant portion of who our customers are being Gen Z, and therefore we need to cater for them. And we also need to make sure that internally we're ready for this new dynamic where it comes to recruitment all the way through to opportunities, because they do have impatience. They want whatever it is that they want now, and it also has to align to their values. So you'll find, for example, someone talking about the cutting down of trees, and that being a significant issue for that generation, because you shouldn't actually be cutting down trees at all for any reason. And that climate change perspective then feeds into our ESG framework, so that we're able to talk about what we're doing as Zanaco to address these issues, because it becomes an issue even for our employees and for our customers. So Gen Z and what they stand for is a critical piece of what we're doing and planning for the future. And I actually agree that a lot of the ideas and the issues that face that generation are also issues that face us, because they're thinking about their future. And if we don't have anything to hand over to the next generation and the generation following that, then what's the point? And so in our engagements with the various parts of what is constituting our future, we're then able to address those issues and identify what should we be doing to demonstrate that we have the right values and we're living by those values, and we're giving the right opportunities to that generation as they come into the workplace now, and to just make sure that as we look into the future, they're able to then see themselves as part of the Zanaco story. And it's something that we always have to think about, and we apply ourselves, and we identify how do we make sure that we're sustainable into our future by addressing this dynamic which is there today. So it's an interesting one, and it's one that we struggle with, because it's not an easy one to deal with today, but it's one that we recognize we have to deal with. Otherwise, our future is at risk.
Mm-hmm. Really well said. Thank you. Actually, I have a question from the audience now, and it's a bit of a personal question. So earlier on, we had a panel on rebalancing life at home. And actually, we had an author who's written a book called Fair Play, which basically is translated into a game that you play with your partner to try and allocate time and balance and so on. What does a balanced home life look like to you? And I'm not going to do round robin. Anybody can answer or nobody can answer.
So I'll have a go if you like at this one. So I would say right up until this last job that I've done, a balanced home life for me would very much be, that I would leave the office at a reasonable time in the evening. I don't drink, so I didn't go out for very many dinners. I would do breakfasts and lunches. And that it was really important to me to get home, to spend some time with my family, see my children, before they went to bed. And that was really good. So I'd like to say that I was an absolute role model for that. Until probably about 18 months ago, I absolutely was. Until I started this job, and now I'm really, I would like some balance in my work-home life at the moment, I would say. So you can't always get it right all the time, and sometimes you have to prioritize. And I've had to prioritize it in starting this role during a pandemic sort of 14 months ago, and it's been pretty full on. But I do think it's really, really important. And so just so that, I think early on in my career, right up until I'm 32 years into my career, right up until 2 years ago, I always was able to balance my work and home life. I'm doing some exercise and doing all the things that, that you really must do to keep yourself fit. I still exercise every morning, so I still do that. But I would like a little bit more balance.
Okay.
I think that's a great and honest answer, isn't it, really? I was very lucky because I married my childhood sweetheart who was a school teacher. And so as my daughter was growing up and we moved around the world, she ended up going to school in the various schools that he taught in, and they had school holidays off together and so on, which really helped with the whole childcare thing, which I think during COVID, we've seen how much families and particularly women have struggled educating their kids at home, dealing with childcare and parental care. And it's sort of, I think it's demonstrated the fact that we probably need a new social contract in order to actually get women their rightful place in the economy and society and properly supported around the world. And in places like the States, it's much worse than places like Europe because, they don't have the social infrastructure and no statutory maternity leave, never mind paternity leave. So we have to think about all these things. But in terms of my own life balance, I did travel around the world from my early 30s. And sometimes I travel every single week. As my daughter grew up, she traveled quite a lot with me, and so did my husband, especially if they were on school holiday or, weren't working. And so the way that I balanced was to actually include them in my life. And so we've been to places on the back of trips to Latin America. We've gone to Easter Island and places like this. So I think you try to achieve the balance the way that you can and try to expose your family to as many great experiences as you can along the way.
Well said. Mukwandi?
If I may, talking about visiting different places, please do visit Zambia. Come to the Victoria Falls if you haven't been, so that you achieve that work-life balance.
I was booked there when COVID hit.
Oh, you need to come back. So the word balance in work-life balance is my definition of it. Oftentimes you have to lean one way or lean the other way. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to achieve that 50-50 perspective per se. It's just a matter of what do you need to do at that point in time? And how do you make sure that even as you're creating that balance, you're able to still deliver from a work perspective, and you're able to still deliver from a home perspective. So it's about focus, it's about planning, it's about putting together what works for you and your family. You sit down with your partner and your children. I've got 4 children and I'm married, and I had to find a way through all this. And I figured out, I brought in whoever I needed to. My mother-in-law had to step in sometimes, my sisters, just to make sure that at any point in time, my family needs were catered for, and at any point in time, my work needs were catered for. So it's a balance. That's what it is.
Really super interesting. And thinking about this balance and what we've all been living through with COVID and the hybrid work situation, are you seeing or feeling burnout with your employees? I mean, we have 5 women in the Alliance, in the Secretariat, and you know, it's a challenge. I mean, you know, one of our team members is in Lebanon, where they were out of school for 2 years, and she's a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. So it's a real issue, this work-life balance in the new working world of work. So what are you seeing in your companies, and what are you trying to do to ameliorate this for women in particular, of course?
So we definitely saw, I would say probably 6 months ago, was the height of the strain. You know, we measure the strain in the organization, and this is not gender specific, this is right across the organization. We saw that at its height, and it was just after the sort of very punitive lockdown in January, February in the UK earlier this year, you know, where there really was no childcare, there was nothing. It was just, you know, I think everybody was just thrown back into a very difficult situation indeed. And of course, you know, dark mornings, dark nights, all of that sort of stuff, which I think, again, psychologically make it very, very difficult. So we've seen that strain improve over the last few months as schools have reopened, and, you know, people have got back more into a rhythm of, there's been support mechanisms around, which of course there weren't in the early stages of the year. But it is an area I'm really concerned about for women, just simply because, you know, they are doing most of the, as Anne mentioned earlier, whether it's the childcare, the same time as working, the same time as perhaps parental care. And I think there has been a huge strain. And, you know, we've tried to really support that by the flexibility of you know, the way that we do things here. However, you know, my anxiety now is that as things return to a more normal, that women are left in that flexible work state, you know, carrying on doing that maybe at home, and the men are back in the office, and, you know, so that the women are missing out on the conversations, that, you know, the side of desk opportunities that are happening. And so I'm very conscious at this point in time about how we deal with that. And I welcome of always, you know, great ideas from the other panel members and also from the audience. But I think it's a really tricky one. I was really optimistic about COVID at the beginning. I thought that it would give women, you know, and as men would see that working from home actually could work, I thought it would give women the real opportunity. And I have to say, I have changed my mind over the last few months. And now I'm actually worried that it will actually potentially hold them back.
I agree with that, Amanda. I think the stresses and strains on women have been intense, and I know in America about a quarter of the women in the working world, in the corporate world, have said they're thinking of stepping back just as a result of COVID. And of course, we've seen many small businesses go to the wall. Now, having said that, we've also seen small businesses actually rise in some geographies over the last year or so, the UK being one of them, Australia, Germany. There's been about a third more small businesses opening up, and women are moving into entrepreneurial areas. I think what we have to do is think about how to make sure that they get supported and funding. And there's been a lot of discussion about that over the last couple of days, I know. But I'm with you that as we go back into this hybrid environment, it's really difficult. I mean, I experienced it myself on Monday. I went to a 7-hour board meeting on Monday, had a 3-hour return commute, got home at, 10 hours later, only to sort of think I better have a look at my emails. And wondered, how we actually balance Zoom with real life. And I think we have to be very careful as we go back and look at the data and say at each stage, are we promoting the same number of men as women? I'm wanting that tracked inside our company with an aim that sort of all positions that get advertised get filled 50-50. And what does our attrition rate look like at every level of the organization, men and women? And is there anything different coming out in the employee engagement surveys? And all of these things that are quantitative and qualitative data that you can use to keep your finger on the pulse of it doesn't solve the problem, but I think having the data helps you perhaps have the management discussions that you can start saying, what should we be doing differently to really address this? But it's certainly a concern, and I think Aviva are very lucky to have you at the top there, thinking of all of these things in a very holistic way and a very empathetic way.
The same applies in Zambia. And as we get back to the office, we find that there are a lot of women who are making that request to step aside. And what is very clear is that the time that we were dealing with COVID-19, there was a lot that people were dealing with in terms of their personal lives. And it's very difficult to just drop that and just come right back and carry on where we left off. So that is proving to be a big challenge, and we just have to be conscious of it and be ready to support the team that requires that necessary support. We've also had psychosocial counseling and just various measures to support people as they come back to the office and just make sure that they're ready to actually do a full shift in the office and not have the psychological issue of having to step away from the family and all the issues that they leave there. So yeah, we're facing those challenges as well here in Zambia. And I think COVID did at one point improve things for the family because everyone was home, even though it also meant that there was stress there and communication issues and all the rest of it. But coming back to the office is bringing in another whole dynamic to it.
Yeah, I wonder, the French government has tried to put in a limitation on, you're not supposed to answer your emails after 6. I'm not sure it worked, obviously, but I'm just curious, how is corporate leadership thinking about supporting employees to turn off their machines? Because it does feel very 24/7, especially all of us that are working in essentially global organizations where somebody's always up, right? So how could we help women to actually do that? Because Amanda, you said you always had your time, you made sure that you were home for the kids, but undoubtedly you went back to work after they went to sleep. So, how do we help our female employees in particular manage this 24/7 clock?
I mean, I think the first thing for me is like being good role models ourselves. And, I was saying about myself earlier on, I really think it's important that we as leaders show that, we are leaving the office at a reasonable time, that we're thinking about, things that you do, the important things with your family that you should do, and that you're really consciously thinking about the fact that people are working, particularly if they are going to work from home more often than they did before. That means there is this danger that people are online the whole time. So, for me, it's not calling meetings at unreasonable times. Not, you just being really disciplined. There are simple things that you can do, but what you can't have is one group of people with this, well, we're in the office till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the evening, and then meetings are any time and calls are any time. And then the other group where it's not like that, because then, that will end badly. I do worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
We've got things like we have Zoom-free days and we have meeting-free Friday afternoons. It doesn't mean that people aren't working. It means that people are not invited to be engaging with everybody else at that time and can get on with what they need to get on with, which does give you like massive breathing space.
Mm-hmm.
What we try to do is to just make sure that the weekends are as free as possible so that people can actually do their own thing at that point in time. So it's a balance again, as I said earlier on, and it's about just being able to create that focus individually and as a team.
Okay, round robin, quickly, 30 seconds each. One piece of advice you'd give to women in order to advance their careers.
Oh, I mean, for me, take every opportunity that's given to you and have the confidence to go for it.
Excellent. Anne?
I would say, look, life's a marathon, it's not a sprint. I'm in my mid-60s now. There's still a lot of things ahead of me. Never give up. And as Churchill said, if you're going through hell, just keep going.
I would say success is not for the faint-hearted. Just keep it going and make sure that you bear in mind where you want to end up and how you will get there, and you will eventually get there. Thank you.
That's excellent. And I have one final question for Amanda. We hear that you're a Welsh rugby fan.
Oh, I am. I actually chair the professional game in Wales and sit on the Welsh Rugby Union board. So yes, that is my voluntary part of my role. Wales, I'm from Wales, and obviously rugby is very, very, very important in Wales. And so I thought that would be something I would give back to the Welsh community. Although there are times I have to tell you where I wish I didn't. It's
right.
very
well,
difficult.
Congratulations on winning the Six Nations last year, and also captaining the Lions, which they weren't so successful, but that's great. It's great to have a woman at the head of Welsh rugby. I mean, it must be a very male bastion.
Oh yes, it certainly is.
Well, listen, thank you so much, all of you. You're fantastic leaders. We really got a lot out of it and very much appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ines. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you very much.